and hit that subscribe button if you're not already subscribed. And don't forget to hit the notification bell. What's going on, Negi? I see you in the chat already. I switched this up. I had another topic I was going to do. I was going to talk about the iconoclasm and stuff, but I decided this would be a better subject for me to do tonight. So I might hit the other subject later time. Yes, try to get this thing going on. I got quite a bit of information and stuff, and we're going to be dispelling some myths about slavery in America. And we're going to look at some interesting things. Mainly, I did this on my last video last, but this Afrocentric information and actual. So this prompted me because I had to correct them. Some stuff I didn't know, so it wasn't true. So I hit him with that about slavery. So let's up in here. So we're gonna go. Yeah.
General. And in humanity, the man portrayed on the screen so vividly that you flinch. This man showed no mercy in the pursuit and interrogation of his victim. He was called the Witchfinder General.
Which y'all can get your headlines with. See what I did lately. Amazing. They not seeing all the shit. just as best you can. But eternally, I don't see it that way. Pave the road clear is what you said. But your call for the people dead. Claim y'all know you. Watch your desires overthrow you, man. Yo, bull, man. Mask wearing like dude. All caps like y'all yelling. That's a rap. Take the break. Find it all. Somebody set the check. Yo, show respect.
What line of business might you be in? Business. Finding. Which finding? Oh, that's good.
That next buzz. What's the buzz? Watch the general bugs. Internet warriors caught up in dark corridors. Fiction like more. Should have stayed on the floor. Y'all know no origins.
All right, I'm back. What I'm looking for, like always, right in front of my face. Always in front of my face. This is stupid. I don't know. I gotta get it together, y'all. But damn, almost 7 minutes in and everything. All right, at least y'all know what. Tell me what was up. How am I sounding I should be good now. Hopefully that should be good. So let's get this thing on the road here. We're going to talk about some myths that are told by mostly a lot of Afrocentric people that subscribe to the whole Afrocentric ideology. And you hear a lot of these things, like for one, the America said that black people are 3/5 of a man, like we're subhumans. I did a video on that. You can check that out. All the lessons that I do, you can check out in my playlist section and choose lessons. It's a lessons playlist on this YouTube channel. So you get all the lessons and stuff that I do. Some of the stuff I'm going to mention, some of the things I'm going to mention, I've done videos on. So some things you might want me to talk more about, you can go back to those videos and stuff. Feel it a little bit with more detail. So there's a lot of things and stuff that Afrocentric say that's not true. That's just not true. Also tell us that slavery, people were shipping slaves here from the beginning all the way up into the Emancipation Proclamation. I don't know. Let's just get this thing out here. Park this thing up here. Got my beer. Should be all good for at least an hour for my internet probably screwed up again. Hopefully, I get out. Hopefully. Show it in the chat. All right. So the screen here. One of the first things we're going to deal with is some myths. Some myths. I got a lot of stuff on my board. I was rushing to get this thing in here. So I was going to let everything go the way it goes. All right. From conversation.com. Here's one myth. Start this off. Lead into talk about domestic slavery in America. Oh, I forgot to drop the link. Drop the link. I know, y'all. Bear with me here. Rushing all day. Rushing and losing stuff. Right. This is something that a lot of people think, as I thought myself, that the majority of African slaves that were brought to America to run to the United States. I have reviewed this before on my channel. Actually showed a map. I might have to pull that up. And it shows the concentration of the slaves and where they went. The majority of the slaves went to Brazil, South America. And I would say the least amount of slaves was brought to the United States. If I'm not mistaken, it was 250,000, I think. If I'm not mistaken, right? Oh, yeah. Here we go. It's right in front of me. Okay. The majority of Africa. Did I put the link in the chat? All right, do a little bit. Somebody can hold it down too. The majority of African captives came in what became the United States. Only a little more than 300 captives, or 4 to 6%, came to the United States. The majority of enslaved Africans went to Brazil, followed by the Caribbean, significant number of enslaved Africans arrived in American colonies by way of the Caribbean, where they were seasoned, mentored into slave life. They spent months or years recovering from the harsh realities of the Middle Passage. Once they were forcibly accustomed to slave labor, many were then brought to plantations on American soil. Two, slavery lasted for 400 years. Popular culture is rich with references to 400 years of oppression. There seems to be a confusion between the transatlantic slave trade from 1440 to 1888 and the institution of slavery, confusion only reinforced by the Bible. Genesis 15:13. Then the Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years our descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated. Goes on to Lupe Fiasco. Lupe Fiasco. Just one hip hop artist who referred to the 400 years in his 2011 Imagining of America Without Slavery. Right? Right, so he said, you would never know if you could ever be. If you never tried, you would never see. Stayed in Africa, we ain't never leave. So there were no slaves in our history. We're no slave ships. We're no misery. Call me crazy. See, I fell asleep and I had a dream. It was all. And the verse goes up. And we ain't get exploited. White man ain't feared, so he did not destroy it. We ain't worked for free. See, they had to employ. Built it up together, so we equally appointed. First 400 years, see, we actually enjoyed it. Truth. Slavery was not unique to the United States. It is part of almost every nation's history, from Greek to Roman civilizations. I remember the Greeks were under slavery to the Turks for 400 years. That's one argument I got for the Hebrew Israelites that like to say that we were the only one that was in slavery for 400 years. It's totally false. Roman civilizations to contemporary forms of human trafficking. The American part of the story lasted fewer than 400 years. How then do we calculate the timeline of slavery in America? Most stories use 1619 as the starting point. 20 Africans referred to as servants arrived in Jamestown, Virginia on a Dutch ship. It's important to note, however, that they were not the first Africans on American soil. Now, I don't want y'all to go crazy and talk that the Africans sailed over here before Columbus. I'm not talking about that. It's important to note, however, that they were not the first Africans on American soil. Africans first arrived in America in the late 16th century, not as slaves, but as explorers together with Spanish and Portuguese explorers. Now, I got a video on that. It's called The Black Conquistadors. That's a very good video. You guys can check that out and get the information on that. One of the best known of these African conquistadors was Stephen Seal, who traveled throughout the southeast from present-day Florida to Texas. As far as the institution of chattel slavery, the treatment of slaves as property. In the United States, if we use 1619 at the beginning and the 1865 13th Amendment as it ends, then it lasted 246 years, not 400. Right? But I think the what was it? 1555, a lot of Afro-Centrics like to say, rappers were saying that shit too. A lot of knowledge, like, history type hip hop that talk about political black experience type of stuff. A lot of that shit is driven by Afrocentric ideologies and stuff. So you have to watch what you're listening to and thinking it's true. Just listen at it as music, because the majority of it is bullshit, right? All Southerners owned slaves. Roughly 25% of all Southerners owned slaves. The fact that 1/4 of the Southern population were slaveholders is still shocking to many. This truth brings historical insight to modern conversations about inequality and reparations. Take the case of Texas. When it established statehood, the Lone Star State had a shorter period of Anglo-American chattel slavery than other southern states, only 1845 to 1865, because Spain and Mexico had occupied the region for almost one half of the 19th century, with policies that either abolished or limited slavery. Still, the number of people impacted by wealth and income inequality is staggering. By 1860, the Texas enslaved population was 182,566, but slaveholders represented 27% of the population and controlled 68% of the government positions and 73% of the wealth. These are astonishing figures, but today's income gap in Texas is arguably more stark, with 10% of tax filers taking home 50% of the income. Wow. Slavery was a long time ago. African Americans have been free in this country for less time than they were enslaved. Due to math, blacks have been free for 152 years, which means that most Americans are only 2 to 3 generations away from slavery. That's true. I remember I had to explain that too. That was like early 2000s. I had an argument with somebody about that. That we're only like 2 generations like from slavery. This is not that long ago. Over this same period, however, former slaveholder families have built their legacies on this institution and generated wealth that African Americans have not had access to because the slave labor was forced. Segregation maintained wealth disparities, and overt and covert discrimination limited African Americans' recovery efforts. Right? The value of slaves, economists and historians have examined detailed aspects of the enslaved experience for as long as slavery existed. Forward into this conversation by looking at the value of individual slaves and the ways enslaved people responded to being treated as a commodity. They were bought and sold just like we sell cars and cattle today. They were gifted, deeded, mortgaged, the same way we sell houses today. They were itemized and insured, the same way we manage our assets and protect our valuables. Enslaved people were valued at every stage of their life, from before birth until after death. Slaveholders examined women for their fertility and projected the value of their future increase. That's interesting when they talk about the fertility. The fertility of slave women, most of their children died. If I'm not mistaken, I got a video on this. It's on dietary laws. I think it's called dietary laws. Not dietary laws. The diet of slaves or something like that. It's something to that effect. You got a woman like over like a fire, over a fireplace, like cooking or something like that on the screen. On the thumbnail, you guys want to check that out. As the slaves grew up, enslavers assessed their value through a rating system that quantified their worth. And Al prime hand represented one term used for a first-rate slave who could do the most work in a given day. Their values decreased on a quarter scale from 3/4 hands to 1/4 hands to a rate of 0, which was typically reserved for elderly or differently able bond people, another term for slaves. For example, Guy and Andrew, two prime males, sold at the largest auction in U.S. history in 1859, commanded different prices. Although similar in all marketable points in size, age, and skill, Guy was $1,280, while Andrew sold for $1,040 because he had lost his right eye. A reporter from the New York Tribune noted that the market value of the right eye in the southern country was $240. Enslaved bodies were reduced to monetary value assessed from year to year, and sometimes from month to month, for their entire lifespan and beyond. By today's standards, Andrew and Guy would be worth about $33,000 to $40,000. Slavery was extremely diverse economic institutions, one that extracted unpaid labor out of people in a variety of settings, from small single crops, farms, and plantations to urban universities. This diversity was also rejected in the prices, and enslaved people understood they were treated as commodities. I was sold away from Mammy at 3 years old, recalled Harriet Hill of Georgia. I remember it. It lacked selling a calf from the cow, she shared in a 1930s interview with the Works Progress Administration. We are human beings. She told our interviewer, who those in bondage understood their status. Even though Harriet Hill was too little to remember her price when she was here. She recalled being sold for $1,400 at age 9 or 10. I never could forget. All right, this is talking. I'm not going to read this. This is talking about movies and stuff like that. So I'll put this link in the chat so you guys can check this link. Hopefully the weather's real bad. That one, we will move on to this one here. Easy up the top. The myth that house slaves had it better than field slaves. While physical labor in the fields was excruciating for the enslaved, clearing land, planting, and harvesting that often destroyed the bodies. That didn't negate the physical and emotional violence. Enslaved women and sometimes men and children suffered at the hands of enslavers in their homes. In fact, rape of black women by white slavers was so prevalent that in a 2016 study revealed 16.7% of African American ancestors can be traced back to Europe. One of the study authors conclude that the first African Americans to leave the South were those genetically related to the men who raped their mothers. Let me read that again. One of the study's authors concludes that the first African Americans to leave the South were those genetically related to the men who raped their mothers, grandmothers, and great-grandmothers. These were the enslaved African Americans within the closest proximity to who spent the longest durations with white men, the ones who toiled in the house of slave holders. Woman here, she looked like just like some woman you would see at the grocery store, right? That got to be from 1860, 1850. Hammers, I think, came around in 1830. I think the first, no, 1850, I think, was the first hammers. See that woman there? Nice little lady. Probably a Bible in hand. He was a freed slave. 2015 study determined that 50% of rape survivors develop PTSD. It is hard to imagine that enslaved and freedom-seeking African American survivors of rape, female, male, old, young, no matter their physical or mental abilities, did not experience further anxiety, fear, and shame associated with a condition they could not control in a situation out of control. Those African Americans with the most European ancestry, those tormented mentally, physically, emotionally, and genetically in the house, knew they had to get out. In fact, they fled the farthest. Southern whites are more closely related to blacks now living in Southern whites are more closely related to blacks now living in the North than the South. Right. That's right here. And this. Where is it? Oh, there. A lot of people, you guys are listening, ever heard that slaves were sold on that slaves were sold that slaves were the first stock on Wall Street. Have you guys heard that before? I know Beanie Man probably heard that before. If you want, but copy wrong. All right. The hidden links between slavery and Wall Street. Do you see? Let me get to it. I'm not having it. Yeah. Well, I should have read his article. So it is. Okay, on a hot August day, 25 people are gathered around a small perimeter sign in New York's financial district. The tour guide explains that this was the site of one of the largest slave markets, just 2 streets away from the current site of the New York Stock Exchange. Listen what it said. Just 2 streets away from the current site of the New York Stock Exchange. Men and women and children were brought and sold. This is not Black history, says Damaris Obi, who leads the tour. This is not New York City or American history. This is world history. It's also economic history. Stacy Toussaint, the boss of Inside Out Tours, which runs the NYC Slavery and Underground Railroad Tour. She says people are often surprised by how important slavery was to New York City. They don't realize that enslaved people built the wall after which Wall Street was made. So slaves wasn't sold on Wall Street. And we can learn a little bit more about this. That something's going to shock you too. They built the wall from which Wall Street was named after. By some estimates, New York City received 40% of U.S. cotton revenue through money its financial firms, shipping businesses, and insurance companies earn. But scholars differ on just how direct a line can be drawn between slavery and modern economic practice in the U.S. People in non-slave areas, Britain and free U.S. states, routinely did business with slave owners and slave commerce. Now, I spoke about this on Harvard, slaves in Harvard, or something the name of the lesson was. And I also mentioned this in the Salem witch trials, the blacks and Native Americans in the Salem witch trials, and the witch trials, I think it's called. I go into this also. Galvin Wright, professor emeritus of economic history at Stanford University, but he says the uniqueness of slavery economic contribution has been exaggerated by some. Slavery thrived under colonial rule. British and Dutch settlers relied on enslaved people to help establish farms and build new towns and cities that would eventually become the United States. Enslaved people were brought to work on the cotton, sugar, and tobacco plantations. Crop they grew was sent to Europe or to the northern colonies to be turned into finished product. Those goods were used to fund trips to Africa to obtain more slaves, who were then trafficked back to America. This triangular trading route was profitable for investors. To raise the money to start, many future plantation owners turned to capital markets in London, selling debt that was used to purchase boats, goods, and eventually people. Later in the 19th century, U.S. banks in southern states would sell securities that helped fund the expansion of slave-run plantations. To balance the risk that came with forcibly bringing humans from Africa to America, insurance policies were purchased. These policies protected against the risk of boat sinking and the risk of losing individual slaves once they made it to America. Some of the largest insurance firms in the U.S., New York Life, AIG, Aetna, sold policies that ensured slave owners would be compensated if the slave they owned were injured or killed. By the mid-19th century, exports of raw cotton accounted for more than half of U.S. overseas shipments. That wasn't sold abroad was sent to mills in northern states, including Massachusetts and Rhode Island, to be turned into fabric. The money southern plantation owners earned couldn't be kept under mattresses or behind loose floorboards. American banks accepted their deposits and counted enslaved people as assets when assessing a person's wealth. In recent years, U.S. banks have made public apologies for the role they played in slavery. In 2005, J.P. Morgan Chase, currently the biggest bank in the U.S., admitted that two of their subsidiaries, Citizen Bank and Canal Bank in Louisiana, accepted enslaved people as collateral for loans. If plantation owners defaulted on loan payment, the bank took ownership of the slaves. J.P. Morgan was not alone. The predecessors that made up Citibank, Bank of America, and Wells Fargo are among a list of well-known U.S. financial firms that benefited from the slave trade. Slavery was an overwhelmingly important fact in the American economy, explains Seven Beckert, Laird Bell Professor of American History at Harvard University. Professor Beckert points out that while cities like Boston never played a large role in the slave trade, we read that in one on Harvard and slavery, that some of those slaves, like there were people that owned some slaves, like it wasn't that well known, and it was rich. And there were people that usually moved from the South and they brought their slaves with them a lot of times. And people that dealt with the Caribbean and stuff would bring over slaves, and people would move from the Caribbean to the Northeast. Also, a lot of Native Americans were sent to the West Indies as slaves. Also, New England's fabric mills played a key role in the U.S. Industrial Revolution, but the supply of cotton came from the slave-reliant South. Brands like Brooks Brothers and the oldest men's clothier in the U.S. turned Southern cotton into high-end fashion. Domino Sugar, once the largest sugar refiner in the U.S., processed slave-grown sugarcane. American railroads also benefited from money earned through slave businesses. In the South, trains were built specifically to move agricultural goods farmed by enslaved people. The slaves were also used to labor to build lines. Some scholars even argue the use of slavery shaped modern accounting. Historian Catherine Rosenthal points to enslavers who depreciated or lowered the record value of slaves over time as a way to keep track of costs. In a century and a half since slavery was abolished in the U.S., laws that prevented former slaves and their descendants from full engagement in the U.S. economy have shaped the country. Following the country's Civil War, efforts to pay reparations to the newly freed slaves were squashed. President Andrew Johnson, who took over after Abraham Lincoln's assassination, did not want to annihilate white Southerners during the period of Reconstruction. A series of laws that economically and politically disenfranchised formerly enslaved people led to many of today's inequalities, according to historians. New efforts to find ways to pay reparations are finding traction in 2020 race for president. You see me get no too far, but New Jersey Senator Cory Brooke, a candidate for the Democratic nomination, has proposed a bill to set up a committee that will consider how reparations might be paid. Yeah, that's all I can read on that. Okay, now we're gonna get to Wall Street. This one is the link. I know Killer B can't read and shit, so I can read this shit. So, all right. Okay, now listen here. Let's start. Let's start here. Yeah, I don't know. Check this out. Sign off. Wall Street. So slavery was introduced to Manhattan. Listen now, to the dates. 1626. But it was not until December 13th, 1711, that the New York City Common Council made Wall Street the city's first official slave market for the sale and rental of enslaved Africans and Indians. The slave market operated from 1711 to 1726 at the corner of Wall and Pearl Streets. It was wooden structures with roof and open sides. Um, Actually, that's a little picture to the side, if you can see. Although walls may have been added over the years and could hold possibly 50 men. The city direct benefited from the sale of slaves by implementing taxes on every person who brought and sold it, who was brought and sold it, right? It said like it wasn't until 1711 that the New York City Common Council made Wall Street the city's first official slave market for the sale of it. So slavery was introduced in 1626, right? All right, I think I missed something here. Should have highlighted it. City directly, all right, in the late 18th century, there were a buttonwood tree at the foot of Wall Street under which traders and speculators would gather to trade securities. The benefit was being approximate proximity to each other. In 1792, traders formalized their association with the Buttonwood Agreement, which was the origin of the New York Stock Exchange. The idea of the agreement was to make the market more structured and without manipulated auctions with the commission structure. Persons signing the agreement agreed to charge each other a standard commission rate. Persons not signing could still participate, but would be charged a higher commission for dealing. 1789, the Wall Street was the scene of the United States' first presidential. Okay, I got it. So the slaves wasn't. I think it's on another thing I got. I screwed up. So confusing myself. It says slavery was introduced in 1626. It wasn't until 1711 that it made Wall Street the city's first official slave market for the sale and rental. All right, the slave market operated from 1711 to 1762 at the corner of the Wall Street, right? And then it says, and what is it? Right. Wall Street. Yeah. Here we go. In 1792, traders formalized association with the Buttonwood Agreement, which was the origin of the New York Stock Exchange. Right? So the whole Wall Street New York Stock Exchange started after the slave market was there. And the slave market was there for, what's that? 50 years. The slave market was there. I confused myself. I marked my spot. And this is like too much stuff. See if I can find it. Now I was going to jump to the main topic. Is it? A second. I might have missed it somehow. All right. And that looked like the dude from GOTC had a commercial. Y'all still hear me? All right, I'm back. All right. So let's go here again. Second middle passage. Thanks to Transatlantic Slave Trade database, edited by, this coming from root.com, edited by David Eltis and David Richardson. We know that about 388,000 Africans were transported directly to the United States over the course of the trades of the slave trade. I had said 250, but the other thing I said 300. Let's say 300, okay, whatever. Which ended officially in 1808. There were no longer any more imported slaves into America unless they were smuggled. This brutally cruel, actually, I speak on that, and it was called Slave Trade and Slavery in the United States, or something like that. It's called. I did that video recently, maybe like a month ago. Maybe it was early. This brutally cruel and disruptive phase of the trade, as all American school children should be taught, is known as the Middle Passage. But what is often left out of many survey courses is the second Middle Passage. Let me know in the chat if my audio gets out. But what is often left out of many survey courses is the second Middle Passage. And that dark chapter in American history involved more than black people. Dark chapter in American history involved far more black people than were taken from Africa to the United States. Y'all hear that? So the Middle Passage involved more African slaves than the actual first Middle Passage crossing. Right? It was also uniquely cruel and brutally destructive. It folded during the era when cotton was king. Remember, we just talked about that cotton that was coming. That was that the North needed so badly. They had the profit. The North is where the cotton was processed. You know, it was picked in the South and then it was brought to the North to be processed and be made into fabric. States benefited. That second forced migration was also known as the domestic or internal slavery. In the 7 decades between the ratification of the Constitution in 1787, the Civil War of 1861, the historian Walter Johnson tells us in his book, Soul by Soul, life inside the antebellum slave market. Approximately 1 million enslaved people relocated from the upper South to the lower South. 2/3 of these go to domestic slaves, through the domestic slaves. In other words, 2.5 times more African Americans were directly affected by the second Middle Passage than the first one. That's it. When you think of the image of slaves being sold down the river on auction blocks, mothers separated from children, husbands from wives. It was during this period that the scenes became increasingly common. The slaves were sometimes marched hundreds of miles to their destination, on foot and in chains. Indeed, the years between 1830 and 1860 were the worst in history. unprecedented growth of the cotton industry. Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin, had it patented in 1794. Cotton harvesting was extremely labor intensive. Cotton gin is separately simple. It just separates cotton fibers or lint from the seeds. For the cotton gin, one person would clean 5 to 6 pounds of cotton a day using the cotton gin. One person would clean 1,000 pounds of cotton a day. But what you see with that too, you're going to get people developing more land also with. The use of that cotton gin. All right, I'm back. Okay, I know I screwed up, but where? All right, I'm back up. The slaves were sometimes marched hundreds of miles to the destination on foot and in chains. Indeed, the years between 1830 and 1860 were the worst in history of African American enslavement. Why? Because of the unprecedented growth in the cotton industry. Until Eli Whitney invented the cotton gin and had it patented in 1794. Cotton harvesting is deceptively simple. It just separates cotton flowers and lint from the seeds. Before the cotton gin, one person could clean 5 to 6 pounds of cotton using the cotton gin. One person could clean 1,000 pounds. So with that, you will get a need for more land to be down. You know what I mean? Less labor. The effects were immediate and dramatic. As the historian Ronald Bailey explains in an article for Agricultural History in 1790, the United States produced 1.5 million pounds of cotton in 1800. In 1800, it produced 35 million pounds of cotton. That's a lot of cotton. By 1830, that figure had grown to 331 million pounds. And by 1860, on the eve of the Civil War, cotton production had grown to, goddamn, 2,275 million pounds. Damn. All right. More money the planters made from cotton, the more cotton they wanted to grow. More cotton the planters wanted to grow, the more slaves they needed to grow cotton. The world desire for cotton and the southern planters and the northern industrialists' desire for profits seemed unsettled. Meanwhile, since the slave trade from Africa was ended in 1808, slaves in the The slave trade from Africa was ended in 1808. Slaves in the Upper South had become extremely valuable commodities. Their owners in the Upper South, you heard that, right? Their owners, whose tobacco plantations were no longer, say, sufficiently profitable, sold them south in droves. As Ira Berlin concludes in The Making of African American, the Four Great Migrations, the internal slave trade became the largest enterprise in the South outside of the plantation itself, and probably the most advanced in its employment of modern transportation, finance, and publicity. Most of us are familiar with the dreadful Trail of Tears, which in 18th Creek and the Choctaws and the Seminoles from the region of the South known as the Black Belt, resettling from the Indian Territory, which became the state of Oklahoma in 1907. Ever wonder why this was necessary? In the word, richest cotton soil in the world, and leading to in American history. The number of slaves needed in the new states of Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, where cotton reigned, increased the average of 27.5% each decade, demanding the entire families to relocate from plantations in the East and Upper South. As Stephen Dale pointed out, Southern slave prices were then tripled, raising from $500 in New Orleans in 1800 to $1,800 in 1860, the equivalent of $30,000 in 2005. No wonder the dominant model of the era was cotton is king. Cotton produced by slave labor was also profitable. That it would take a costly civil war and the loss of more than 600,000 lives to the end. All right, I'll share this guy. This is Henry Louis Gates Jr. The Root website. All right. Hope y'all learning something. I know I get with the foolishness. Y'all want to see the foolish stuff. But the stuff ain't foolish, but y'all want to see the crazy stuff. I know that all the time. All right. Did I drop it? Oh, I dropped it. I need to get rid of this. Shut up. This. And that's the slave trade. Screen wasn't even sure. Thanks, Ray Store. All right. All right. Domestic slave trade, also known as the Second Middle Passage, and the interregional slave trade was a term for domestic slave trade within the United States that relocated slaves across the states during the antebellum period. Slaves, 1 million slaves in the midnight. It was most sufficient in the early mid-19th century, when historians estimated 1 million slaves were taken in a forced migration from the Upper South, Maryland, Delaware, Virginia, Tennessee, Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina, and the District of Columbia to the territories and newly admitted states of the Deep South in the West Territories: Georgia, Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, and Texas. To the mid-1800s, so the story that 1 million slaves were taken in forced migration. So they took they took 1 million slaves and they marched their asses down further south. So economists say that this transaction in the inter-regional slave market were driven primarily by differences in the marginal productivity of labor, which are based in a relative advantage between climate for the production of staple goods. The trade was strongly influenced by the invention of the cotton gin, which made short staple cotton profitable for cultivation across large swaths of upland Deep South. It's called the Black Belt. Previously, the commodity was based on long staple cotton cultivated in coastal areas in the Sea Islands. Disparity in productivity created opportunities for traders to exploit, and it facilitated regional specializations in labor production. Due to a lack of data, particularly with regard to slave prices, land values, and export totals of slaves, the true effects of the domestic slave trade on both the economy of the Old South and the general migration patterns of slaves into Southwest territories remain uncertain. These have served as points of contention among economic historians. The internal slave trade among colonies emerged in 1760. The internal slave trade among colonies emerged in 1760 as a source of labor in early America. In the early years, some colonists traded in Native Americans, but began to favor the use of imported slaves from Africa. Following the American Revolutionary War, expansion of settlement into areas west of the Appalachians, and abolition of transatlantic slave trade in 1808, the domestic slave trade became increasingly important, especially as settlers flowed into the Deep South markets to develop and staff plantations. It is estimated that between 1790 and 1860, approximately 835,000 slaves were relocated to the American South. Economists described them as being imported from the Upper South, but they were being relocated. They were being relocated U.S. territories. Historians most widely use the figure of 1 million slaves relocated during this Middle Passage. Analysis by Robert Fogel and Stanley Engerman suggests that 60% of the total migration of slaves was due to sale of slaves through domestic trade. Their conclusions were strongly criticized by other economists. The biggest sources of the domestic trade, such as Virginia, North Carolina, Maryland, and Kentucky. From these states, most slaves were imported to South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Arkansas. Fargo and Engelman attributed the larger to movement as planters relocated their entire slave or existing ones in the later years. The new lands in the South attracted many land-hungry settlers. So these are like new states being developed, like, you know what I mean, undeveloped land, and the people moving out there. Got the slaves. So what? They said 16% of the slaves, 16% of the total migration of slaves was due to the sale of slaves through domestic trade. Huh. Right. Contributors, we read down the other thing. Using an admittedly limited set of data from Urich Phillips, including market data from Richmond, Charleston, mid-Georgia, and Louisiana, Robert Evers Jr. estimated that the average Deep South markets in 1830 to 1835 was $232. Although this differential deals only with price and does not account for transport costs and other operating costs. The price gap displays a potential opportunity. Evans suggests that the interstate slave trade earned a wage greater than that of an alternative profession in skilled mechanical trades. If skilled mechanical trades can be considered a reasonable alternative occupation for slave traders, then it appears that interregional slave traders are made better off, at least in monetary terms. However, if slave traders possess skills similar to those used in supervisory mechanics, then slave traders received an income that was not greater than the one that they would have received had they entered an alternative profession. But most slave traders likely did not possess the skills of a railroad president or chief engineer. That shit was a hustle. Wow. Primary issue that faces such analysis is the effect of interregional slave trade on Western migration. The primary issue that faces such analysis is determining the westward migration of the interregional slave trade from the incidental of the relocation of slaves master. Robert William Fogel and Stanley L. Elgerman estimate the slave trade accounted for. Wait, can I just read this shit? No, this is something. 16% of the relocation of enslaved African Americans and their work time on the cross. This estimate, however, was severely criticized for the extreme sensitivity of the linear function used to gather this approximation. A more recent estimate given by Jonathan B. Pritchett has this figure at about 50%, or about 835,000 slaves total between 1790 and 1850. Without the interregional slave trade, it is possible that forced migration of slaves would have occurred naturally due to the natural population pressures and the subsequent increase in land prices. Professor Miller contends that it is even to the westward flow of the population. So within the market, the demand of prime age slaves given by the ages of 15 to 30 accounted for 70% of the slave population relocated to the Deep South. However, due to the fact that the ages of slaves were often unknown by the traders themselves, physical attributes such as height often dictated demand in order to minimize the asymmetric information. With slaves moving further south through the slave trade, conditions and treatment of slaves were understood to decline as they moved further south. In comparison to working in relatively small groups, and perhaps alongside some farming families in the Upper South, they were forced to do field work in large gangs under close white supervision and had less control over the time. The dense trees and underbrush of many riverfront areas in Louisiana and Mississippi were being cleared for the first time to develop plantations, adding to their struggle. Slaves most feared being sold to planters in Louisiana, the state's grueling climate with high heat and humidity, as well as the pressures of cultivating and processing. All right. Go back to where I was. Okay, it was talking about the age of the slaves between 15 to 30, and they counted for 70% of the slave population. And they didn't know most of the slaves' age. So like their height and stuff like that determined, like, you know what I mean? Were you old or young and stuff like that. So there wasn't really too many records kept on these slaves on their ages. Especially with doing businesses, it probably was easy for somebody to lower a person's age to get more money too. And it said the slaves feared mostly to be sold to Louisiana because of the heat, the humidity. It says the pressures of cultivating and processing the labor-intensive crops of sugarcane and cotton resulted in harsh conditions for labor. With demand high for both commodity crops, planters and overseers were known to be physically abusive to slaves. The slaves feared being sent to Louisiana as a death sentence. So you got these people, and the slaves' production is slow because of the heat and the climate and stuff. So I guess the slave overseers and the masters would be more harsh because you have to get that work out. You know what I mean? Not you have to get the work done. You know what I mean? So they had to have overseers to make sure they did the work. All right. A couple of slave acts I wanted to go over. I'm going to search. Oh, man. All right. Make sure y'all hit that white like button. All the 4 people that's here. I don't care though. Y'all with me though. I could be somewhere else. Y'all with me. That's what's up. All right. Slave Trade Act. That's what I want. Yep. Yes. Oh, this is where I got the stuff from. All right. We go with this one here. Confiscation Act in 1861. Confiscation Act of 1861 was an act of Congress during the early months of the Civil War, permitting court proceedings to confiscate of any of property being used to support the Confederate independence effort, including slaves. Bill passed the House of Representatives in 1648 And in the Senate, 60 to 48, and in the Senate, 24 to 11. Abraham Lincoln was reluctant to sign the act. He felt that, in the light of the Confederacy, recent battle practical effect, it might be seen. He was also worried that it could be struck down as unconstitutional, which would set a precedent that might derail future attempts at emancipation. Excuse me, y'all. Only personal lobbying by several powerful senators persuaded Lincoln to sign the legislation, which he did on August 6, 1861. Due to the fact that the bill was based on military emancipation, no judicial proceedings were required. And therefore, Lincoln gave Attorney General Edward Bates no instructions on enforcing the bill. Was when a year of its passage, tens of thousands of slaves had been freed by the first Confiscation Act. So tens of thousands of slaves was freed because of this act. I guess during the wars and stuff, and they come into power, I guess, of the area and stuff. They would take all the resources that free. With respect to slaves, okay, so the act authorized court proceedings to strip their owners of any claims to them, but did not clarify whether the slaves were free. See, I jumped the gun. As a result of this ambiguity, these slaves came under Union lines as property in the care of the U.S. government. Well, god dang. In response to this situation, General David Hunter, and Union Army military commander in Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida, issued General Order Number 11 on May 9th, 1962, freeing all slaves in areas under his command. Wow, okay. Upon hearing of Hunter's action 1 week later, Lincoln immediately counter-mandated the order, thus returning the slaves to their former status as property in the care of the federal government. Well, doggone. I never knew that. That's kind of heavy right there. Let me know in the comments what y'all think on that, what y'all can add to that. Before the act has passed, Benjamin Franklin Butler had been the first Union general to declare slaves as contraband. Some other Northern commanders followed this precedent, while officers from the border states were more likely to return escaped slaves to their masters. Let's read this again. Before the act was passed, Benjamin Butler had been the first Union general to declare slaves as contraband. Some other Northern commanders followed this precedent, while officers from the border states were more likely to return escaped slaves to their masters. The Confiscation Act was an attempt to set a consistent policy throughout the Army. Wow. Okay. Let's read. Yeah, it's only a few. Let's read this. Okay, it has been enacted by the state, the Senate, and House of Representatives in United States of America, and Congress assembled that if during the present or any future insurrection against the government of the United States, after the President of the United States shall have declared by proclamation that the laws of the United States are opposed and the execution thereof obstructed by combinations too powerful to be suppressed by ordinary course of judicial proceedings, or by the power vested in the marshals of law, any person or persons, his, her, or their agent, attorney, or employee shall purchase or acquire, sell or give any property or whatsoever kind or description, with the intent to use or employ the same or suffer the same to be used or employed in aiding, abetting, or promoting such insurrection or resistance to the laws or any person or persons engaged therein. If any person or persons being the owner or owners of any such property shall knowingly use or employ or consent to use the employment of the same as foresaid, all such property is herein declared to be, and shall be the duty of the President of the United States to cause the same to be seized, confiscated, and condemned. And be it further enacted that such prize and capture should be condemned in the district or circuit court in the United States having the jurisdiction of the amount. Okay. I'm not gonna read all that. I'll put the link in the chat for y'all. So I got this act. Yeah. Yeah. All right. All right. Oh, did I screw that link up? No. Okay. Yes. All right. Next. Okay. That one. This one. All right. There you go. One. The act prohibiting the return of slaves. All right. The act prohibiting the return of slaves was a law passed by the United States Congress during the American Civil War, forbidding the military to return escaped slaves to their owners. As Union armies entered Southern territory during the early years of the war, emboldened slaves began fleeing behind Union lines to secure their freedom. Some commanders put the slaves to work digging entrenchments, building for the. Hold on 1 second, yo. Give me 1 second. All right. Okay. Where I left off here. Oh, okay. The act prohibiting the return of slaves was a law passed by the United States Congress during the American Civil War, forbidding the military to return escaped slaves to their owners. As Union armies entered Southern territory during the early years of the war, emboldened slaves began fleeing behind the Union lines to secure their freedom. Some commanders put the slaves to work digging entrenchments, building fortifications, and performing other camp work. Such slaves came to be called contraband, a term emphasized their status as captured enemy property. Other army commanders, particularly Democrats, citation needed for that shit, returned the slaves to their owners. Congress reacted by approving on March 13th, 1862, an act prohibiting the military from sending escaped slaves back into slavery. The act to make an additional article of war was approved March 13, 1862, with the following wording. No, be enacted by the Senate and the House of Representatives of the United States. All right, let me start the article. All officers or persons in the military or naval service in the United States are prohibited from employing any of the forces under their respective commands for the purpose of returning fugitives from service or labor, who may have escaped from any persons to whom such service or labor is claimed to be due. And any officer who shall be found guilty by a court martial of violating this article shall be dismissed from the service. And be it further enacted that this act shall take effect from and after its passage. Okay, that's good for y'all. All right. The hell is a print? I didn't look at this before. Oh shit. Okay, let's go. The Shipping Commissioners Act of 1872. Among other things, the act was passed to combat crimps. Okay, crimp is not a crip, the crimps. It's the practice shit. Okay, it's the practice of kidnapping people to serve as sailors by coercive techniques such as trickery, intimidation, or violence. Those engaged in the form of kidnapping were known as crimps. The related term press gang refers especially to impressment practices in Great Britain's Royal Navy. That's interesting. Called Shanghai too. I bet Negi knows something about this shit. That sounds like something Negi would know about. Shanghai. These are like certain terms or whatever. Let's see what this thing here. First, once, okay, let me start from here. The role of crimps in the spread of practice of Shanghai resulted in a combination of laws, economic conditions. Why is this stupid thing? I'm not trying to connect the icon. What's going on? Why is that shit starting? All right. Economic conditions and the shortage of experienced sailors in England and on the American West Coast in the mid-19th century. First, once an American sailor signed on board a vessel for a voyage, it is illegal for him to leave the ship before the voyage ends. Wow. Wow. The penalty was imprisonment. The penalty was imprisonment, the result of federal legislation enacted in 1790. This factor was mitigated by the McGuire Act, 1895, and the White Act, 1898, and finally abolished by the Seamen's Act in 1915. Damn. So they were doing this shit in 1915? Wait a second. Yeah, why does this stupid thing keep popping up on my damn computer? Not even trying to promote the welfare of American seamen in the Merchant Marine of the United States and Longshore and Harbor Workers' Compensation Act, designed to improve the safety and security of United States seamen and eliminate Shanghai. Damn. So that's almost like like you get on a ship or like a plane, the motherfuckers ain't stopping that shit once they turn that motherfucker on. Like, know what I'm saying? You ain't getting off that motherfucker. You just on there until they stop somewhere else. Like, know what I mean? So maybe that was some type of thing that, you know what I mean? That what I'm trying to say is it was taken from this. Like, know what I mean? The laws were passed, but people are still doing things almost like that. You know what I mean? They're not kidnapping people, but the customs of seamanship or whatever type of work they do and stuff. Just like today, say whatever people that do farming, some of the things that they do, the practices that they do could date all the way back to like slavery time. You know what I mean? So the same thing with like the whole ships and planes or whatever. Second, the practice was driven by a shortage of labor, particularly of skilled labor on ships in the West Coast. With crews abandoning ships en masse because of the California gold rush, a healthy body on board the ship was a boon. Finally, Shanghaiing was made possible by the existence of boarding masters, whose job was to find crews for ships. Boarding masters were paid by the body, and thus had strong incentives to place as many seamen on ships as possible. This pay was called blood money, and was just one of the revenue streams available. These factors set the stage for the crimp, a boarding master who uses trickery, intimidation, and violence to put a sailor on a ship. The most straightforward method for a crimp to Shanghai a sailor was to render him unconscious, forge his signature on the ship's articles, and pick up his blood money. This approach was widely used, but there were more profitable methods. In some situations, the boarding master would receive the first 2, 3, and 4 months of wages of a man he shipped out. The sailors were able to get an advance against their pay for an upcoming voyage to allow them to purchase clothes and equipment. But the advance wasn't paid directly to the sailor because he could simply abscond with the money. Instead, those to whom money was owed could claim it directly from the ship's captain. Instead, those to whom money was owed could claim it directly from the ship's captain. An enterprising crimp already dealing with a seaman could supplement his income by supplying goods and services to the seaman at an inflated price and collecting the debt from the sailor's captain. Oh, shit, I get it. Some crimps made as much as, $9,500 a year, equivalent to $270,000 a year for being a grimy motherfucker. Shit, that ain't bad. Excuse my language, y'all. That's not bad. The crimps were well positioned politically to protect their lucrative trade. The same thing with workplaces now. Like people position themselves to keep things a certain way and stuff, to keep certain people eating. The keepers of the boarding house for sailors supplied men on election day to go from one polling place to another, voting early and often for the candidate who would vote in their interest. In San Francisco, men such as Joseph Frenchy, Franklin, and George Lewis, longtime crimps, were elected to the California state legislature. An ideal spot to ensure that no legislation was passed that would have negative impact on their business. Some examples include Jim Shanghai Kelly and Johnny Shanghai Chicken. What the fuck? Excuse my language. Shanghai Chicken Divine in San Francisco, and Joseph Bunko Kelly of Portland. Stories of the ruthlessness are innumerable, and some made it into print. Another example of romanticizing stories involves the birthday party Shanghai Kelly threw for himself in order to attract enough victims to man a notorious sailing ship named the Reefer. Well damn. Named the Reefer and 2 other ships. Wow, that's heavy. So he could just fool your behind on the damn ship. Like, yeah, man, hold on. I forgot my cigarettes on the ship. Come on, man. Come on here with. Come up on there. Close the gate. You all set. You all set. Damn. Crimping. The manpower to keep the ship sailing to Alaska and Klondike kept crimping, a real danger into the early 20th century. Damn, they were doing it to the 20th century? That's what I was saying, y'all remember? Like you on the ship, like you hit. Like they take that rope from the dock, like you all set, you on there. That ship not stopping for you, but turning back around. Wow. Man, that's crazy. Okay, let me get rid of that. Crimping. Yeah, that's some shit. All right. I don't know if I'll put the shipping thing up in here now. I don't know if I did already. Yeah. Right. Now I put this other one up in here. Oh, I already deleted it. So, definitely. All right. All right, there goes the link for that. Well, it's supposed to be the link for that. All right, there goes the link for that. Give me like 30 seconds, y'all. Wow, 1 second. Attending my food. All right. Oh, man. All right. Got confiscation. The Return of the Slave Act. Okay, now I want to get to this. That. Put these two out. Two things to go. All right, reading of enslaved people in the United States. I'm gonna pop that one early. Nah, oh my God. That's the link for that. All right. Breeding of enslaved people in the United States was the practice of slave states of the United States, of slave owners, to systematically force the reproduction of enslaved people to increase the profits. It included coerced sexual relations between enslaved men and women, forced pregnancies of enslaved people, and favoring women who could produce a relatively large number of children. The objective was to increase the number of slaves without incurring the cost of purchase and to fill labor shortages caused by abolition of this Atlantic slave trade. Still can't get over the crimp thing. That's crazy. Actually, you know what? Wow. Wait, hold on. I mentioned this on the show the other day too. My boy, years ago, this is like for a little bit, maybe 1999 or something like that. He had a tape that he got. He recorded a dude downtown, like the city and stuff. And the guy told a story of you saying back in the day, they had these. I forgot what he called it. It was a certain name, but it was like a work camp thing. Like if for homeless people that people come up to you like, hey, you want to work? And you would get on this train and they would take you down south and your ass is be trapped down there. They just turn you into a slave. And he was talking about like his experience like with that. Huh. With the crimp thing. So like, you know what I mean? You get food to get your ass on that train. The next thing you know, you off. You all set. Huh. All right. The end of the American slave trade. Laws that ultimately abolished the Atlantic slave trade came about as a result of the efforts of British abolitionists. Christian groups such as the Society of Friends, known as Quakers, Evangelicals by William Wilberforce, whose efforts through the Committee of the Abolition of the Slave Trade led to the passage of the 1807 Slave Trade Act by the British Parliament in 1807. This led to increased calls for abolition in America, supported by members of U.S. Congress from both North and South, as well as President Thomas Jefferson. At the same time that the importation of slaves from Africa was being restricted or eliminated, the United States was undergoing a rapid expansion of cotton, sugarcane, and rice production in the Deep South and West. The invention of the cotton gin enabled the profitable cultivation of a short staple cotton, which could be produced more widely than other types. This led to the economic remnants of cotton throughout the Deep South. Slaves were treated as commodity by owners and traded alike, and were regarded as a crucial labor for the production of lucrative cash crops that fed the triangle trade. The slaves are managed by a chattel asset, similar to the farm animals. Slave owners passed laws regulating slavery in the slave trade, designed to protect their financial investment. The enslaved workers had no right than a cow or a horse, or as famously put by the U.S. Supreme Court in the Dred Scott decision, they had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. The large plantations, enslaved families were separated by different types of labor. Men tended to be assigned to large field gangs. Workers were assigned to the tasks for which they were best physically suited in the judgment of the overseer. Breeding in response to end of slave imports. The prohibition of the importation of slaves into the United States after 1808 limited the supply of slaves in the United States. This came at a time when the invention of the cotton gin enabled the expansion of cultivation in the uplands of short staple cotton, leading to clearing land cultivated cotton through large areas of Deep South, especially the Back Belt. The demand for labor in the areas increased sharply, led to the expansion of internal slave market. At the same time, the Upper South had an excess number of slaves because of the shift to mixed crop agriculture, which was less labor intensive than tobacco. To add to the supply of slaves, slaveholders looked at the fertility of slave women as part of their productivity, and intermittently forced the women to have large numbers of children. During this time period, the terms breeders and breeding slaves, childbearing women, breeding period, and too old to breed became familiar. Planters in the upper South states started selling slaves in the deep South, generally through slave traders such as Franklin Armfield, Louisville, Kentucky. On the Ohio River was a major slave market and port for slipping slaves downriver by the Mississippi to the south. New Orleans had the largest slave market in the country and became the fourth largest city in the U.S. by 1840 and the wealthiest mostly because of its slave trade and associated businesses. The dynamics, personhood to thinghood. Several factors coincide. Well, how do you say that? I hope this thing. Man, my computer always do that. Highlight one thing and highlights the whole goddamn thing. It's stupid. The hell with it. To the breeding of slaves in common practice by the end of the 18th century, chief among them the enactment of laws and practices that transformed the view of slaves from personhood to thinghood. In this way, slaves could be bought and sold as chattel without presenting a challenge to the religious beliefs and social mores. Wow. Of the society at large. All rights were to the owner of the slaves, with the slave having no rights of self-determination either to his or her own person, spouse, or children. Slaveholders began to think that slavery was grounded in the Bible. This view was inspired in part by an interpretation of the Genesis passage. Cursed be Canaan. The lowest of slaves shall he be to his brother. Right. So the Pope used to, for those you don't know, I do videos on the Hebrew Israelite cults. The African and the cult was looked down as the lowest of all creation. And they solidified that by saying, look how Africa looks, right? And they sold us to the European, that they believe that the Americans, that the black Americans that are here in the United States are not the same people that are still in Africa. So it's like Ham will be, you know what I'm saying? Like he's getting beat up by everybody, basically, except us. So any country could go over there and just do what they want to do in Africa. So they like it is crazy. I explained it another day. The drinking too much. Some whites use the Bible to justify the economic use of slave labor. The subjugation of slaves was taken as a natural right by the white slave owners. The second-class position of the slaves was not limited to his relationship with the slave master, but was to be in relation to all whites. Slaves were considered subject to white persons, with the curse of Canaan. Like he said, a slave shall, where is it? We got the scripture, right? Cursed be Canaan, the lowest of slaves shall he be to his brothers. Study basically 2,588 slaves in 1860 by the economist Richard Storch. He found that on slave holdings with at least one woman, the average ratio of women to men exceeded 2 to 1. The imbalance was greater in the selling states, where the excess of women over men was 300 per thousand. All right, citation. Ned Sublet, author of the American Slave Code, states that the reproductive worth of breeding women was essential to the young country's expansion, not just for labor, but as merchandise and collateral, stemming from a shortage of silver and gold or sound paper timber. He concludes that slaves and their descendants were used as human saving accounts, with newborns serving as interest that function as the basis of money and credit in the market, premised on the continual expansion of slavery. All right. Robert Fogel and Stanley Egerman reject the idea that systematic slave breeding was a major economic concern. In their 1974 book, Time on the Cross, they argue that there is very meager evidence for the systematic breeding of slaves for sale in the market in the Upper South during the 19th century. They distinguish systematic breeding, the interference of normal sexual patterns by masters, with an aim to increase fertility or encourage desirable characteristics, from pro-natalist policies, the generalized encouragement of large families through the combination of rewards, improved living and working conditions for fertile women. Okay, fertile and their children, and other policy changes by masters. They point out that the demographic evidence is subject to a number of interpretations. Fogel argues that when planters intervened in the private lives of slaves, it actually had a negative impact on population growth. Go with this one. Hell out of here. All right. Oh, you said so. You can literally make the Bible's text suit any narrative. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right on that. They've been doing that. I mean, religions they got out, biblical like religions they got out there. It's crazy. I had this thing on the wrong share thing the whole time. Yeah. Shit. All right. History of sexual slavery in the United States. Something else here. Emancipation. After slaves were emancipated, many states passed anti-miscegenation laws, which prohibited interracial marriages between whites and non-whites. But it did not stop some white men from taking sexual advantage of black women by using their social positions under the Jim Crow system and white supremacy, when other parts of the country by ordinary power and wealth dynamics. The Chinese Tanka females were sold from Guangzhou, maybe that's how you pronounce that, to work as prostitutes for the overseas Chinese male community in the United States. Damn. During the California Gold Rush in the late 1840s, Chinese merchants transported thousands of young Chinese girls, including babies, from China to the United States and sold them into sexual slavery within the red light district of San Francisco. Girls could be brought for as cheap as $40, about $1,100 in 2013 in Guangzhou, and sold for $400 in the United States. Many of these girls were forced into opium addiction and lived their entire lives as prostitutes. Anglo-American doctors claimed that opium smoking led to increased involvement in prostitution by young white women and to genetic contamination via miscegenation by Chinese men. Anti-Chinese advocates believe America faced a dual dilemma. Opium smoking was ruining moral standards, and Chinese labor was lowering wages and taking jobs away from European Americans. Slummers often frequented the brothels and opium dens of Chinatown in the late 1880s, the early 1890s. However, in the mid 1890s, slummers rarely participated in Chinese brothels or opium smoking, but instead were shown fake opium joints where Chinese actors and their white wives staged illicit scenes for the benefit of their audiences. Few captives of Native American tribes were used as slaves were not free. Who were used as slaves were not free. When African American slaves were emancipated, Ute or whatever, or women, the Ute captured by the Arapaho and later sold to Cheyenne was one example. Used as a prostitute for sale to American soldiers at cantonment in the Indian Territory. She lived in slavery until about 1880, when she died of a hemorrhage resulting from excessive sexual intercourse. Let's see. There are indigenous people of the Ute tribe, a culture among the indigenous peoples of the Great Basin. They have lived in the region of present-day Utah and Colorado in the southwestern United States for many centuries. Okay. Right. By the 19th century, most of American cities had designated a legally protected area of prostitution. And Chris, I don't even talking about this though. Excuse me, y'all, I'm chewing. If I'm not mistaken, New York City passed a law not like a few weeks ago or something like that to decriminalize prostitution. That's just crazy. Okay, 19th, most American cities had designated left off that. Increased urbanization and young women entering the workforce led to greater flexibility of courtship without supervision. It is in the changing social sphere that the panic over white slavery began. This term referred to women being coerced, lured, or kidnapped for the purchase of prostitution. Numerous communities appointed vice commissions to investigate the extent of local prostitutions, whether prostitutes participated in it willingly or were forced into it, and the degree to which it was organized by any cartel type organization. The second significant action, local levels, was to close the brothels and red light districts. Let's skip down. No, it's all 1990 type stuff. All right, get out of here. Nah, that's not interesting. All right, whatever. All right. All the time. Yeah, that's crazy, right? Now that I'm done, there's 6 motherfuckers up in here. Ain't this some shit? Whole time reading, like 2 people was in here. All right. Thank y'all for hanging out. I don't know if anybody will come on here, anybody listening. The one thing, I ain't trying to read shit. Wait, oh, I didn't mean to put that up there. Maybe did I put that up before? Nope, I'm supposed to put that up there. Okay, all right, that's good. All right, link in here. A few minutes. What y'all thought about the video today? that I dropped earlier. I know it's kind of crazy. You niggas is wicked. Hell, these niggas is wicked. Yeah, man, this is like, it's crazy. Like they call themselves following this thing, and like that shit's crazy. Show me that in the law. You know what I mean? What he doing is righteous. Whatever. Shit is crazy. Unbelievable. Links in the chat for everybody. If not, we get the hell on out of here. I don't know. He gotta learn. You gotta learn. You can keep going if you want, and I can keep going. A whole bunch more. I can make things a whole lot harder. I can make shit a whole lot harder. Nothing. All over some bullshit. Why go through all that? For real. Who in their right mind would push and continue to do what this nigga is doing? I don't know what you say. He can't be writing that. He can't be writing that. No possible way. But I'm just like, God damn, nigga, like, for real. It's not like you the first one. This shit. You like you the first one. But no, you're gonna learn. The boys come. Yo, what are you gonna do when the boys come and shit? That's crazy. But maybe you wanna go to jail. That's maybe what you wanna do. Or just end everything and shit. Maybe you wanna know motherfuckers. Stupid. Motherfuckers are stupid. But I did that to show y'all too how crazy these motherfuckers are and what they willing to do. He think he's right for that. And it's so bold is that I'm eating watermelon sliced candy. I spilled some of mine before the beginning of the show. I'm mad as hell about that. Two things are blazing. I'm like addicted. I don't know what it is. Anything watermelon. But it shows you how they think that God is with them. They think they're doing something spiritual, righteous, like, oh man, it's absolutely fucking crazy. You hear this nigga call out? You know what? For y'all that didn't see it and shit, let me play it. I'll play it. And all of them are just like it. Right? To be just like him. You know what I'm saying? I try to make it funny or whatever, but it ain't. You know what I mean? Not funny at all, but I try to make it like that. So y'all motherfuckers see it. But I doubt y'all niggas understand that shit. Oh, thanks, Stephen Gardner. Stephen Gardner said first time on the channel. Let's see the notification now. What the fuck is this shit on my screen? God damn, that shit don't make no damn sense. I wouldn't even show y'all what the fuck on my YouTube screen. That's so crazy. Damn, I ain't never heard that shit just popped up. Hey, that's some shit. All right. right. Share this thing. All right, here y'all go. Ah, shit, I just raced the goddamn pad. Shit. All right, hold on, I gotta do this thing. This is stupid. Always something. Can't wait till I get off this. All right.
Hallelujah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you had like Amber. I know you never met Amber, but Amber used to get out of me for eating while I'm live streaming. She's like, "What you eating?" I don't be realizing it that loud. Shout out to Amber. I'm gonna get your ass to beat over there at Judah Nazareth. Keep fucking around here.
Hallelujah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what's been going on lately, bro? I've been kind of chilling and taking a little break.
Hey, wait a minute. Yo, Judah, why you let that nigga, why that nigga not speaking the Yahweh language, yo? You can't say hallelujah in the Yahweh language, Judah. Where that you come from, Judah? Goddamn, Judah. Wicked nigga and shit. Why gonna kill you, nigga?
What's been going on?
Oh, man. Yesterday, you know him.
Now you see you done fucked up, I told you.
He showed up on another channel. I actually baited him over there.
No, you didn't,
But,
nigga.
I asked him,
No, you didn't.
to me.
Yeah, I did it.
Trying to make you look bad, nigga. That shit easy as fuck. Ryan. Ah, damn.
I cried 2 tears in a bucket.
Trying to make a motherfucker look bad. You usually trying to make a motherfucker that didn't do nothing look bad. But a motherfucker doing some shit look bad, that shit easy as fuck, nigga. All you gotta do is let your ass talk. Stupid.
I mean, but I got to repent, bro, because I had to go down a road I didn't like, man. But I'm pretty much done with him now that I know he still associates with that homosexual. You know, I come from a Rastafarian standpoint. I don't deal with that shit.
That's the money maker verse right there. The money maker clip. You heard that nigga? They're alive. He right over there with you now.
I'm pretty much done with him now that I know he still associates with that homosexual. You know,
You say you pretty much done with him now, so you know you fuck that homosexual shit, right? But your ass is up over there. He was over there today. He was over there yesterday. He was over there what? The day before yesterday. The day before that. And shit. Like the next day after this video right here. After this clip. The next day. Your whole ass was over there. Looking for help. These niggas ain't gonna help you. You stupid.
I come from a Rastafarian standpoint. I don't deal with that shit.
They don't want that smoke. Ain't none of them niggas gonna help you. None of them. They're like, shit, hell no, nigga, that's B. They're like, hell no, nigga. That's B. I'm straight. Yeah, you on your own, nigga. You should have shut the fuck up like he told you.
You done fucked up, I told you.
But your ass is over there today. Yeah, I don't deal with that shit, so I'm done with that.
You done fucked up, I told you.
You documented, nigga. You documented. You know.
I gotta make that shit into a soundbite. You documented, nigga. You documented.
He's got to stop slandering the princes of the Most High.
No, you done fucked up, Thomas. No, Thomas.
You documented, nigga. You document.
So do you think that you could try to schedule like a guest appearance when this fool is on the screen? And
that's the parents. Joe, what's wrong with you? Where the fuck they do that shit at, nigga? Like somebody, but hey, nobody told you, nigga. I told you and shit, but nobody else told you. That's why you looking stupid now.
oh, of course. Yeah, you know, could you bring something important with me, with you about Facebook messages and stuff like that?
You keep your dog on a leash. Everybody knows he can't make a move without you.
That's right. You can't do shit without Judah Nazareth, nigga. And Judah Nazareth ain't gonna do shit, nigga. He's not even looking for nobody to help him. Because he know ain't nobody can help him. Dummy. This shit crazy, yo. These wicked niggas, yo. Talk about you bring those text messages and shit. He tried to call me a pedophile now. Because Judah Nazareth dumbass. Judah Nazareth ain't got no motherfucking receipts, nigga. He ain't got no receipts, nigga. None. All that shit he told you, nigga, was all cap. Stupid.
You go cry to daddy.
Right?
Yo, shout out to Mike G, yo. Mike G stole Judah one day. He was like, Judah, why you always doing that shit to niggas? He's like, what you talking about, Mike G? He said, nigga, you know what I'm talking about. You always hyping niggas up and shit for failure. He said, yo, it is like you just be walking niggas into a wall and shit. Listen to this motherfucker.
Now, bro, you come back here and don't apologize, nigga. You live 30 minutes away from bitch ass nigga.
Look, now he's threatening Jose Vega. Shout out to Jose Vega and shit. The Puerto Rican niggas. Shout out to all the Puerto Rican Israelites and shit that hates y'all niggas.
Yeah, I mean, like, y'all ain't gotta do all that, bro. That's like,
Nah, I don't gotta do shit, nigga. I made $500,000 out of prison to sign my name, nigga, because of the power of Yahweh. I was fucking erase you, nigga. You we all know that you're a pedophile. Oh shit! What?
You look so tough now, little nigga.
She's too young. You got that? Nigga, bitch ass niggas want to keep poisoning our people and calling Judah Naz a motherfucking pedophile, nigga, and wanting to fight my brothers like Rob Rack, nigga. Fight!
Nobody calls Judah Nazareth a pedophile. Who calls Judah Nazareth a pedophile? We know he gay and shit. We know he let the tranny and shit touch his kids. We know that. We didn't call him a pedophile. Call him a pedophile supporter. Because he told the story. He told a long, elaborate story that we could tell this shit was going over time, and he knew it. And he let that man literally play with his kids. And then gonna let the kids keep a picture of the nigga dressed up like the tranny. Gonna let him keep it. He was gonna call the girl in the room, his daughter in the room with the picture of the nigga. The girl probably got the nigga hanging up on the wall and shit. The nigga that he called a pedophile. He called that man a pedophile. I didn't say shit. I didn't call nobody shit. He called that man a pedophile. Then he let all that shit go on. So he pedophile supporter, not a pedophile.
Me, nigga! Set a fight for all three of y'all niggas. I will fucking rip your heart out your motherfucking chest, nigga. The Black Messiah, nigga. Girl my way, cut him my way, John Hoy. Negus and the gods.
The goose and the gods. Really, nigga? You open in Prince, nigga?
Better like the fourth son of Solomon.
Better let the first, nigga? What the fuck are you talking about?
Bitch, Solomonic Dynasty, House of David, nigga.
Solomonic Dynasty and shit. Show me one artifact that said that Solomon existed. Out of here. Yo, crazy ass.
I'll kill y'all niggas about this shit.
Hear that shit? That nigga kill a nigga about that shit. About religion. Remember on the show last night when we played Alan West? Like, don't tell me about these motherfuckers and shit. I've been to Afghanistan, Iraq, motherfucker. Don't tell me nothing about them motherfuckers and shit. I know what they do. Huh? What I tell y'all niggas about these motherfuckers? You heard it out your goddamn mouth.
Cut him my way, John Hort. Nigga. Goose niggas, nigga. I'll kill him. One day he actually like really pissed me off. So I like researched into him. I found those like little gay things on the hip hop site. What manner of shiftiness is this? No, I promise you, bro. And this ain't like to kick it with you or nothing. This is like being a real nigga, bro. Like I found out this.
To be a real nigga, right? That fake ass real nigga took his ass back over to juvenile the next day.
Dude still fucking with this gay dude. I'm not fucking with him, bro. Like, this nigga gotta die.
Look.
Now that my real name is out here, now that my business is at stake, you go cry to that.
Not yet, man.
This shit gonna change in the Israelite community. He's trying to put me and Ramel and fucking...
I ain't put Ramel in nothing. You try to put Ramel and conspiracy to murder somebody. That's what you try to do when you put French Doe's picture up in Rob Rack's live stream. Talking about you want to get that nigga hit. And you get paid for life. So it wasn't somebody you know, it was you. Because you just bragged about getting $500,000. No, it's you.
Rob for some fucking goddamn 187 murder shit. I got the screenshot saying he called the feds 2 different times.
Shit. I don't know where you got that information from though. But I don't know say I called the motherfucking feds. But you can see the title of this video, so you can count that. You could definitely count that one as one. You could definitely count that one as one. I'm just helping you out a little bit and shit. You need all the help you can get.
No, you don't. So fuck you, my friend. I'm about to start fucking killing them. Because it's easier, nigga. Because it's easier, nigga.
I know this is hard for you. I know this is real hard for you, but guess what? It's not gonna be easy. It's gonna be so bad for you. It's gonna be so bad. God damn.
Never catch me over there ever again. Because it's easier, nigga. Because it's easier, nigga. Hey Judah, can you please bring out some scripture about Yahweh be Savior, like in Isaiah? Sure, bro. Thank you, bro. I need to repent. Do you? But your ass is over there today. Oh, fuck you, my friend. Yeah, I don't deal with that shit, so I'm done with that. You feeling like if this is life, then we might as well live it while we can. If this is right, this what nights are. Potential like the guy we own this land. You feel this right. Get your feelings right. If you feel this like the power's in your hand, like you feeling like there's no way this isn't right. Persuasion, this was always in your plan. You wonder if the dopamine creates a doper mind. Keys to immortality, try to open minds. Over time, I know no fears, no tears, no crying for me, cause life is life, and life will be without you and me. So let's agree to disagree.
All right, so see, I get with the bullshit. You hear me cussing and all types of shit. God damn. All right, y'all. Thank y'all for tuning in. Brainstorm. I think Shamiya came up in here. Nigga Springfield came up in here. Benny Vine came up in here. And that's all I caught that I remember. I appreciate it. Brainstorm. So, I don't know. I'll see y'all tomorrow, hopefully, yo. I see it. Let this nigga show up and shit. But then I'm gonna be at the police station and shit, filling out a report. If he show up this shit, you know what I'm saying? I have to go down there and fill it. and tell them how I know this guy and shit. You know what I'm saying? That's fucked up. Your family gonna have to come all the way down here to come get you and shit. And your ass in the bag. That's crazy. Unbelievable. But yeah, that yo, I'm up out of here. I'm gonna be the goddamn witch finder general. You find a witch, I'll burn their asses up. I'm glad. I'm so glad you enjoyed it. You're welcome. That yo, I'm out. Shit. What else y'all want me to do?